Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Mahlalela Mentorship Program's first webinar of a series of webinars that aims at skills development and power skills and the like. So our first speaker is going to be Ms. Tokelo Shai, and she can probably introduce herself a lot better than I could. So I'm going to let her go ahead and introduce herself and yeah, enjoy.
Great, thank you, Wade. And I'm excited to be part of the first webinar series of the Mahlalela Mentorship Program. So as the session was titled, it's called CV Building and Customization, but I'd like to call this personal branding because that's what it's all about. It's about how you present yourself on paper to make sure you stand out, but more importantly, telling your story in a way that is compelling to the reader. So just to start off in terms of sharing a bit about myself and my story in particular, as you probably would have seen on the bio, if you've read about it, a lot of my work and experiences have been heavily centered on the sustainability space, more on a focus on climate, nature, and now in my current role on people. So I'm originally from Limpopo, but I'm currently living in Milan in Italy. And I got into this field from essentially working as an intern at a climate NGO in Cape Town. And this is an experience I got right after my bachelor's, which I did in Cape Town in applied statistics and chemistry. So working at this organization is essentially where my journey began. And it's where I got exposure to the field and I saw the challenge of the climate crisis, but also the opportunities it presented. And also, more importantly, it is where I got inspired to further my career and to further my studies in climate change, agriculture, and food security at the University of Galway in Ireland. So, in my studies and also in my work, I've always tried to do more than the brief or more than what was required of me. So when I was studying in Ireland, I used to sit on a steering committee um, for the program, but also always went to go on and do conferences and volunteer as much as I can. And I remember Wade always used to say, "Oh, TK, you like things." And honestly, it's how I opened doors for myself. And it's part of how I was able to actually do a lot of things in my studies to build skills, but also even in my work. I always volunteered while I was working. When I was at Green Cape in Cape Town, I was selected to be part of the Global Bioeconomy Champions, and there we're also doing quite a lot of work in terms of ensuring that the voices of young people are being captured in the processes. I was part of the UNESCO Youth as Researchers program. So I was always volunteering and trying to access various opportunities to build up my skills. So, what I actually learned in the process is that you need to be able to understand how you package and bundle your skills. And it's a lesson I had to learn because when I finished studying, I actually found myself in a position where I didn't have a job and I started actually searching for jobs and I spent months applying for jobs and I was just not getting through the door and I was not understanding how am I not getting through the door. So it took a lot of introspection, a lot of reflection in terms of what is it that I'm not doing right? So I spoke to a lot of people. I asked people to review my CV and I learned that actually I had the right skills in place and I had all the necessary experiences. I was just not packaging it in a way that actually was compelling to the companies that I was applying for. So, what I'm essentially trying to say is that, what I'm sharing with you here today is part of a journey I took in terms of learning how to make sure that my CV works for me and also realizing that the time that I invested in this could be beneficial for a lot of people. So I'm just quickly going to share my slides to basically share with you some of these lessons that I learned in the process. So you can also gain the confidence to actually put out the CV out there that works for you. Let me just quickly share my screen. Wait, please let me know if you're seeing it.
Yep,
Perfect.
visible from my side.
Visible from your side.
Also, feel free to add questions into the chat as Tokelo is busy giving a presentation, and we can address them after the presentation.
Great. So in the process of basically learning how to basically fix my CV and make sure it works for me, I ended up starting this small business called Mahladi CV Review. And this is honestly very light touch. It's not something that I do on a regular. I've just had a lot of people come to me saying, can you please help me with my CV? And I realized that obviously what I learned is actually quite beneficial for a lot of people. And the goal of this is essentially to make sure that I help people showcase their unique abilities through personalized and targeted CVs, that they're able to then unlock meaningful opportunities as a result. And the aim is to make sure that you're telling your story in a way that helps you actually get access into that first step of the career journey. So there's quite a lot of people I've helped. This is something I started about a year or so ago, and it's just been amazing just hearing how just being able to actually get the CV right has helped a lot of people. And the most recent person I assisted, the lady was just saying how she spent about 10 years without getting an interview to now currently being busy and booked. And so the first thing I often do before I even start this whole process is to ask people, is your CV getting you into interviews? If it is, then it means the CV is not the problem. And I think that's what I also learned. It was like, okay, what is the issue that's not helping me penetrate or gain that access? And it was realizing that, okay, the CV is the problem. But if you are getting interviews and you're getting the right kind of interviews, that's also very important, because there's people who are applying, either they apply through recruiters. It's, I guess, they get a job in the end, but it's not the right kind of jobs, or their CV is not getting them the kind of jobs they're interested in. So there's also that element as well, in terms of, is the jobs you are interested in you getting you the CVs, or is it that you're just getting, like, I don't know if that makes sense, but it's like you are getting it through recruiters, but it's not necessarily the ideal job. So it's about making sure you're actually also tapping into the right kind of jobs that you're looking for. So I'd also be curious to know if your current CV is actually helping you get or land an interview in the first instance. So in addition to that question, the first step is also trying to understand, how you tell your story. It's very important that you do a bit of introspection to think about, okay, but why am I doing what I'm doing? Why am I studying this program? What motivates you essentially? What are some of your unique abilities and qualities or talents? And the people I've worked with so far have mostly been people that are a bit more advanced in their careers. So when we often touch on this question, we go through a process of, what have you heard in your performance reviews in terms of what you're good at? And you obviously get feedback in various ways. And I think if you're currently studying, this is something you can ask either your supervisors or some of the students you work with, just to get a sense of, what is it that I'm really good at, particularly what's inherently good and what's being consistent from what everyone is saying about you. So I remember I did the same, where I actually asked some of my coworkers to basically tell me, okay, just from the one project we worked on, what do you think was good? What do you think I need to improve on? So just getting that feedback is helpful for you to answer these questions, especially if you don't know yourself. Then it's also important for you to consider, what do you consider your core purpose? And I think this is a very difficult question to ask people, because oftentimes this changes over time, but also people just don't know. But it's still something to think about in terms of, what it is you think is meaningful work for you or fulfilling work for you. And also, more importantly, what do you value? And I think this is an important question because when you start thinking about how you personalize or target your CV, it's about making sure that your values are aligned to that of the company or organization you're applying for. So making sure that there is that clear match or alignment is also quite important. So part of what I say is my mission, and this is essentially maybe the first sentence you see on my CV, is that I'm working to cultivate inclusive spaces that provide agency for people to meaningfully contribute to the transition to a sustainable and healthy planet. And this is what I currently do in my role, but also it's something I see translated as well in the CV process because I'm providing agency for people to be able to unlock and tap into meaningful opportunities. So it's one thing that I then put in as a first line to say, okay, who are you? What are you doing? And that's the first thing they see. So then I'm just going to go quickly into all the various elements of CV writing, CV structure. So I've seen quite a lot of CVs and I've seen them in the CV review process, but also in my current role. We're recruiting for a junior researcher, and in the one cycle we received about 8,000 applications, which was ridiculous for a small organization like ours to try and actually go through a process of reviewing that many applications. So we needed to put in a lot of filters and criteria to basically eliminate a lot of the CVs that we received. And this is where the CV structure becomes very important because some of the common issues that I see and I've seen quite a lot is the first thing is that CV is just too long. People have about 4, some even 8 pages long CVs. No recruiter has time to look at a long CV. And I'm speaking about this from the perspective of going into industry. I know for sure in a lot of PhD positions, most people end up having a lot of CVs that end up including publications. So I'm speaking about this purely from experience in terms of industry. I'm not sure to the extent to which this would be applicable in an academia field. But the other thing is poor formatting. I know people want to try and beautify their CV and make sure it looks good, which is okay. But the most important thing with the CV is the substance and the content that's within the CV. So try to avoid having too much formatting, avoid using tables, especially if you're applying for those companies that have, it's called an ATS system where you then upload your CV. So for those companies, they usually actually have systems that then do a quick check of the CV. And if your CV is not well formatted, then you'll automatically be rejected. And try not to include photos. I know some people tend to do that. I think only if you're applying in an industry where that's important, then yes, included. But ideally, try to avoid. You do want to try to avoid a lot of biases that are injected in the recruitment process. So the less you can reduce, the better. So don't try and include your photo. Then also personal informations like your ID, your ethnicity, things like that is also areas you should try not to include. Even your hobbies, it's also not necessary to include that. And I think one other important thing to note is that your CV is not a one size fits all. You can't use the same CV across all the jobs you apply for. And this is one thing I saw quite a lot when we were recruiting for a junior researcher, that you could tell that the person did not even bother to open your website and see what you do because they're just using the same CV across all the board and not trying to use any keyword or anything that shows that, oh, okay, they actually went and saw what we do on our website and are using some of the language we use. So try to avoid doing that, which is why it's important to actually personalize and target your CV. And then also don't just list all the responsibilities. Like I'll touch on this a little bit more, but it's very important that your CV should not feel like a job description, which I think a lot of them often do. And also, lastly, in this day of AI, I think a lot of people are just copy pasting AI CVs, and you can see that quite a lot. I know in some of the applications, people were even copying I think ChatGPT has an option where it says certainly, and it actually goes and gives you all the description of what you asked for. So I was like, I could actually see that someone actually just copy pasted exactly even that actual what do they call it? That actual code they put for the ChatGPT to generate the CV. So it was just ridiculous that people are just even blindly copying, pasting that. So I think AI is useful in terms of making sure that you can identify some of the keywords important for the CV, but that's to the extent that I think you should do that. Your CV needs to be authentic. And then in terms of structure, because I know there's people in the room that are still early in their careers and also others that are a bit more advanced. So if you're still early in your career, it's important to focus on your qualifications, but also your voluntary experiences and leadership experiences. I think, sorry, it's more important to highlight that, especially if you don't have a lot of work experience. So emphasize that more, and then go into a bit of work experience that you've done. Whereas if you're more advanced, it's important to then focus on your work experience and also more so the relevant work experience, then highlighting some of the membership you're part of, any certifications you've attained, and also similarly the leadership experiences that you've took on. I'm just going to pause here a bit just to catch a breath. And then see if there's any questions, but then I'll go into each of the elements of the CV.
Okay, any questions for Tokelo for now? Obviously not very long-winded questions, just because we're trying to keep track of time. Okay, we have a hand raised, Zandile.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Good afternoon, everyone. I have a question on the AI point that you mentioned on your last slide. So what I usually do if applying or when I'm applying, I would use AI to refine the professional summary. And so far it has worked, but I want to know the disadvantages of using that.
I mean, there's nothing wrong if you're doing it for refining the profile summary. The issue with that is that because that profile is where it's the most important for you to basically show your authenticity or who you are as a person, make sure that that does not actually get taken away. If in your refinement, you still need to be making sure that who you are and what you do is still coming across. But if you're just then taking a generic, oh, Sandile has XYZ experiences, she's done 1, 2, 3, it's just not going to tell me a lot. And I can share this a little bit more now in the profile section.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Great. I guess I'll just quickly move on. So I'll quickly touch on each of the elements of the CV and focus
Sorry,
more.
Tokelo.
Yes.
We do have one more question we can
Okay.
take. Hasiris?
Hi there. Quick question. Just in terms of the membership and leadership, and also with, so I've used those CV builder like websites because they look attractive, and then at least you know you're not missing anything, and then you've got the like consistency of each part of your CV. In the beginning of it gives you the opportunity to write a bit of a description about yourself. Do you think that's even worth it, or if you're going to look at my CV, are you just going to ignore anything I write and just go straight to what I've got in terms of experience and qualifications?
I'm not sure I understand in terms of how it does that. So I would need to
it's like a personal, just imagine like a LinkedIn page, and then it's an about me.
Okay. And this is at the top of the CV.
Yeah.
Okay. No, I think that's fine. That's very critical to have to make sure you're actually talking about what it is you do and who you are. And I think definitely those CV builders, it's good to use them, but just make sure that if you're applying for companies that, I mean, I think if you're doing it via an email submission where you're just attaching it, it's fine. But if you're going to be uploading your CV anyway as part of their platform, make sure that is as simple as possible. Because I know those CV builders come with that bad formatting that I was trying to caution against. So that I think in terms of formatting is fine. But in terms of the content that it is helping you think about and what you need to be including, then definitely that becomes quite useful.
Great, thank you.
Cool. Tokela, you can carry on.
Great, thank you. So I guess since everyone is asking about the profile, I'm glad. I mean, the profile, about me, mission statement. So that's basically that.
CV building. Sure. No, we share on the group.
Sorry, I think I'm getting background noise. So this is basically that top summary you have in your CV, and it's very important, like I said, because of the rise of AI type CVs, that this is your opportunity to basically show your authentic self as much as you can. So it's important to make sure you now have that. So it's not necessarily requirement, but because of this day and age, it's important to make sure that that's included. And part of what I say is important to highlight in that, and it's about 3 to 4 sentences about me, like we were just talking about, that describes the why, which is why do you do what you do? Your what evidence do you have of your work, and your how, which is how do you go about doing it. And this is basically like basic for any organization, any company, any individual that's basically trying to present or showcase their value to the market, that this is something they need to articulate. And I've just put an example here from the African Marine Solutions in terms of how they've basically used this framework to articulate that. And they talk about, how they are a catalyst for economic empowerment and shared value creation. This is basically why they do what they do. They want to deliver value to their clients and make sure that they're managing their risk to international standards. And in terms of the evidence of their work, they go about talking about how they've been launched and have consolidated market position in South Africa and securing contracts. So this is where you're then getting a bit more descriptive, and you could just pull out 1 or 2 examples from your CV that you want to showcase, or even just share how within your whatever years of experience, this is what you've actually done to basically contribute to your why. And then how you do it is basically trying to articulate, the steps you take, your approach. How do you do it that is different from others? And for example, with AMSOL, they basically say how they conceptualize, but also are utilizing experienced personnel and specialized assets and equipment. And they do this as well in a partnership approach. And I took one example here of a CV that I've done, where the person basically shared how what's very important for them is they're a quality and market specialist. They were basically talking about how they're very interested, or they're passionate about building trust and loyalty. Like trust and loyalty kept coming across in my interview with them, that was clearly something that they valued quite a lot. And part of what they do is that they are delivering purpose-led and high-quality products to the market. And they do this by fostering innovation, implementing robust quality management systems, and so on. And one thing I wanted to also highlight here is this is where it's very important to then start thinking about how you target to a particular company, right? So in this case, trust and loyalty can remain, because this is very much your core values that you want to make sure you are articulating to the company or organization. But the way you can then switch it around is then check the job description and see, okay, so in this instance, you're delivering purpose-led and high-quality products. You can go and see what the company you're applying for, how they value product delivery. Is quality important for them? Are they thinking more innovative? So then you could easily switch this around to say delivering innovative and high quality products, or delivering, I don't know, market-led and whatever product. So you can switch that language around to make sure that that is aligned with the company you're applying for. But also similarly, in terms of how you do it, you can also play around with what then becomes more important, right? So implementing robust quality systems can stay in, but you can also pull in some of the examples from the job descriptions in terms of what is expected of you to deliver for that particular role. So those are also areas where you can then play around with your skills to then make sure that that matches that of the job. So this is an example of how you can build this out according to the framework, but also think about ways in terms of play around with the keywords to make sure that that matches the job you're applying for. Then in terms of work experience section, so this is the section where you are then building out, sharing examples of what it is you've done in your past experiences. It's always important to make sure you're ordering this from your most recent job, but also you don't necessarily need to include all the roles you've ever had. And I think this is one of the issues why people tend to have long CVs, because they want to take you from the first job they've held all the way to what they're currently working on. And it's not necessary. I think it's important to still have a CV like that, where you have a long CV and you actually make sure you have it with all the different roles. But then when you're applying, you can just pick and choose the relevant ones to keep it to 2 pages. And like I said in the beginning, don't just list responsibilities and achievements. Make sure that you're focusing on the value you've particularly added as Tukelo or as Sandile doing it. And then I just pulled out this, I think I put in like generate a marine AI CV. And this is an example of how basically a CV with a lot of responsibilities. Basically, when I read this, I'm just basically reading a job description. I'm not confident I know how Tukelo as a marine biologist is different from Sandile as a marine biologist, because you're just basically listing responsibilities in this instance, and it's not an attractive CV for anyone to consider. So what I suggest you include is that, first of all, you limit it to like 3 to 4 bullets and select the most relevant of those bullets. For example, in this instance, and not to say you take them as they are, but you could go and take maybe delivering community workshops, maybe preparing technical reports and publish, and maybe utilizing statistics to generate meaningful insights. So you could take some distinct ones that at least reflect different skill sets, but then make sure, first of all, that you're focusing on the impact or the value you added and how you achieve that, and then quantify as much of your impact as you can. Make sure you are using action verbs where you're highlighting, I fostered, I developed, I enhanced, I supervised. So you basically show how, you've led and taken initiative. An example of how you do this is that, so this one says supervise 3 interns by supporting with data analysis and cleaning. it's okay. It's not bad, but it's also not good. So you can instead go and say, you've enhanced data integrity across the work stream. So that's the impact you had. You actually went and enhanced data integrity across your work streams in the organization. But you also did that by coaching 3 interns to streamline the data cleaning processes. So you're basically saying, here's what I've done, here's the impact I had in terms of thinking about the broader mission of the company, the broader mission of the project, the broader mission of your work, and then saying, here's how I did it. I coached 3 interns. You coached. You didn't just, I think coach or mentor is actually good. And then you coach them to streamline the data cleaning processes. So this is an example of how you can basically take these and change them into showing how you've actually delivered the impact of this and how you've particularly gone and done it differently. So that's basically it on the work experiences. Try to keep them to 3 to 4 bullets. Focus on the impact. Use as much numbers where you can quantify. Make sure you do so. And then also definitely highlight some action verbs where possible. And then on qualifications, so this is the education section where you basically highlight, your qualifications. It's more important, as I said in the beginning, for the early careers to basically provide as much as information as possible on this particular section. And part of what you can do there is include some of the relevant courses that you've done, basically noting some of the courses you took on that are specific to that job. You can also note your thesis topic, share your grades, whether you were on the dean's list or first class honors or any awards you received. You can also highlight any conferences that you attended or where you presented, also any international exposures. For example, I was part of the exchange semesters at UCT, and I got to go to Austria at the time. So even just noting that already tells the recruiter that, oh, okay, so you've actually been exposed to, different environments and being able to adapt. So that already also says something. And also if you've had any publications, you can note a few of those there as well. Similarly, for those advanced in their careers, I think for early career, it would depend where you are at, but it's not necessary to include your high school educational levels, especially if you're way advanced in your career. I don't think you need to be going into your high school qualifications, but you can definitely highlight any short courses you've taken and also any professional development trainings you've been doing through your work. You can also note any certifications you've attained. For example, especially some of the CVs from people I've reviewed where they actually had to take like some ISO standards or health and safety certifications. So things like that you can highlight. But also noting that this is on the basis of whether these are relevant for that role. And also, again, for the advanced career, you can also note any publications that you've made in the process. Then on leadership experience and memberships, and when I say leadership experience, this is essentially where you're basically what I was saying, that you're taking on any kind of voluntary experiences where either you sit on a board or a steering committee position, you were a jury member of something. So these are things you can just highlight to basically say, on top of my job, I also do X, Y, Z, that I'm actually, attaining other skills besides what I'm gaining from the job. So these are all kind of voluntary experiences. If you have a charity organization that you're running on the side, these are things you can highlight here. And also similarly, if you're a member of some association, like a food or marine biology association, that's also something you can highlight because you're also showing that you're actually exposing yourself to new knowledge and learning as much as you can. And, networking where possible. So I think things like these actually add more to the CV, and it's important to add those in. So that's essentially it in terms of the CV. I know people wanted us to also cover the cover letter, but I also wanted to just talk about the job search itself as well. But in terms of the cover letter, this is the opportunity for you to basically share your story and provide as much details about your CV where possible. So this is where you then go into the why you do what you do, why you do it, how's your work aligned to that of the organization. You can talk about how your values resonate with that of your target company or organization. And it's important to just basically show your authenticity. And I think now more so than ever, cover letters are going to become important, and authentic cover letters in particular will be more important because of how, a lot of things can easily be done through AI. So you need to use this as the opportunity to tell your story. So the way you do this is that you basically can use the first couple of sentences to explain your why and your interest in that company. Then you can pick one or two jobs in your CV and then just elaborate a bit in terms of how that relates to the job. And it's important to just keep this to one page. So that's the guidance on the cover letter. And I just wanted to share one example, which is one that I also just quickly pulled out from AI just to see what it generates. And one thing I'll definitely say with this one talks about, dear hiring manager, I'm excited and blah, blah, blah. So the first thing to do is don't address your cover letter to a hiring manager. Go and do the research and find out their actual name, who is hiring for that role. So you can actually show the company that actually I've spent time to go and figure out who is hiring for this role. So you can go check on LinkedIn, even if you can't find necessarily who the hiring manager is, you can just go and see, check LinkedIn who's in charge of that program or who's in charge of that project. And even the CEO, you can put the CEO's name. Just don't make it too generic. And then explain why you're applying for the job and where you saw the job post as well. So it's important to also just add those few items. And then share, as I already said, something on your interest or motivations and how those align with the company. So I think this is where you can go and do a bit of research, which is what I do usually. Is I'd go on their YouTube pages, see what they usually use as their key messages in the companies. Like you can hear, like every company will have a strategy that they're trying to push. So you'd want to actually get a sense of what is it that they're actually pushing. So you'd even want to go and read the company strategy and try and make sure you're using some of those words around what their mission is and what they're trying to do in the next 5 years to make sure that you are actually positioning yourself to contribute to that strategy. So that's also just some examples of how you can just go and, go the extra mile to show your interest in the company, and try to create as much emotional connections as you can. It's important to make it emotive where possible. And like I said, highlighting some of your experience. And I just pulled one. It's not necessarily a cover letter, but it's I think it's a crowdfunding site where someone put up what they are doing. And I found this just very interesting because it was very personal. The person was talking about how they grew up on a farm and what it meant to them, and how food is just more than just putting food on the table. It's about culture. And they talk about how this motivated them to become a dietitian and completed their bachelor's. And now they're working at the World Food Program. So it's just basically like telling your story in terms of why you do what you do, as I already said. And this is one example where this is very emotional. You're actually connecting to the person and the experience, getting a sense of who they are, where they come from, their background. So basically trying to get into that place where it's like you're not just going to talk about, oh, I have 5 years of experience doing 1, 2, 3. You're actually taking a bit of a step away from the norm, but, sharing something a bit more authentic than the generic. So that's basically it on cover letters. And then the last thing I just wanted to check or rather share is around the approach to job search, right? So one of the other things I also realized is that sometimes, people say, oh, I can't find a job, but it's not necessarily that they can't find a job, but it's because they don't know where to look or where to search for jobs. So I would usually ask people, what kind of sources or platforms are you using to search for your jobs? What is your approach as well in searching for a job? Do you have some kind of tracker that you are using? Do you have a list of companies that you're tracking? Like, what is your approach in terms of making sure you are landing that job that you're looking for? So I think it's just also important in understanding that there are other avenues in terms of tapping into where you search for a job and an approach to make sure that you're doing this in a way that actually is systematic as possible. So, and also even just tracking your applications, because this is where you actually realize that people are just using a one size fits all. Because part of that will be, okay, I would have a list of like, okay, here's the jobs that I want to apply for. Here's when they end. Here's the status of the job application process. Here's where I've heard back, right? You're also helping yourself see, okay, what is it about this? Was this really not a right fit for me? I maybe should not have applied for this in this way. So just helping you actually assess and improve as you go, as you're applying for these jobs. Because honestly, applying for a job is a job within it of itself. So you need to be spending time and thinking about how you approach it as much as you can and doing your due diligence to make sure that you do it right. So I just wanted to end with, just having a forward-led career building approach, especially for people that are currently still studying, right? That you need to be actually doing the work to understand what is happening within your field. What are some of the trends that are taking place? It's what we used to actually do when we're at Green Cape, doing market analysis and identifying opportunities. That I think this is something you can easily apply for yourself in your field, where you're constantly assessing where your career is going, where is it changing to, where the new opportunities that are emerging are, and assessing whether your skills are currently aligned with that, and if there's a need for you to make sure that you are tailoring your skills to make sure that you have the ability to actually tap into those opportunities. So making sure that you're currently looking in terms of, how do I actually make sure that when I am done finishing with my undergrad, by the time I study, my skills are still relevant enough for me to tap into the market, right? So if you're currently studying, that means, okay, is there any extra courses I need to be taking that can equip me to tap into that? Or do I need to be doing any voluntary work to build that skill? Like, what level of preparedness am I putting myself in to make sure that I'm able to access those opportunities? So definitely try to do that as much as you can. Even if you're working, it's also an important approach to do, where you're constantly assessing whether your skills are still relevant and if there's ways for you to make sure that you're able to tap into the future market. So that's it. Thank you, everyone. I'm happy to have a quick consultation if you're interested in me supporting or quickly looking at your CV and helping you in the process. But you can reach out to me using these details. And I think Wade will share the presentation afterwards. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Takula. That I even learned a few things in that presentation myself. So please keep this slide up, just so that if they want to reach out to you, they can do so while we address the questions. Feel free to also put your hand up if you have questions, or put it in the chat. I do have one question on the chat, well, two questions. For the cover letter, do you use language like I feel, I think, I hope, or do you stick to facts and information about me?
Yeah, I think you should definitely try to keep it as professional as possible. Yes, you should be authentic, but I would definitely avoid using a lot of I feels and I think, because you should definitely say, here's what I've done, right? You can showcase evidence of your work, but I don't think it's good to it's emotive in terms of, your storytelling, but not necessarily language wise.
Hmm. Okay. And then do you also include your ambitions for the future?
In the context of how that relates to what you want to do for the company, right? I mean, you still need to make the connection to the company. If your ambitions are not aligned to that of the company you're applying for, then it doesn't make sense for you to include that. If you're saying you want to do 1, 2, 3 in the future, and that's actually very important as something that is aligned with what the company wants to do, then definitely include that.
Cool. And then Uasora.
Yes, am I audible?
Yes, you are.
All right, thank you, Takela, for such a wonderful presentation and your expertise. Mine is just on the consultation. Is it free or April?
Sorry,
I
too
think
low.
she's asking if the initial consultation is free.
Yeah, the 15-minute is free. It's a free consultation. But if you want anything further, then I'll definitely share my pricing details.
Okay, all right, thank you so
Great.
much.
If there are no questions yet, I'm going to pop something in the chat. It's a poll, and it's quite important because the last question is also on the next session, which is project management. Like, I know we don't think a lot about it, but if you think of a dissertation or a thesis or whichever project you're dealing with in your postgrad or in your studies, it also could be treated in some ways as a project because it also involves a lot of time management, people management. So I'll be posting that in the chat. In the meantime, are there other questions? Feel free to just raise your hand and ask. Is everyone seeing the poll?
Should I stop sharing? Sorry, I don't know if I...
Yeah, I think they might have gotten all your details. If not,
Sorry.
you can always reach out to one of us and we can put you in contact with Tokelo.
Quick question. You're on the question 3 of the poll. It just says question option 1 or 2, and I might be missing something.
Are you talking about the second question?
The third question.
Oh, that might be a dud. It's just the 4 questions.
Right.
Thank you. Okay, if you guys have filled in the poll, thank you so much. We'll see you most likely on the 9th or the 10th, depending on majority, obviously. And once again, thank you, Tokelo. That was really an informative talk.
Thank you guys very much.
Thanks, everyone.